And these are going to be reference marks so that I can be sure and put all of the parts back in the same place, which is really critical whenever you go to balance. The motor has a flat spot on it. So what I'm doing, there's a hole here, and the hole is so that you can get to the mounting screws for the mount. And there's 4 screws, so you want one of those screws to be dead on the flat spot on the shaft. So what I've done is I've lined up the flat spot on the shaft with this hole, because that's where the first screw is going to go. And also I'm going to pick a spot on the motor, and we're going to say this opening here, because this is where the wires are, and we're going to use that opening, and we're going to do the center of that opening. So what I've done is I've put a mark on the motor so that it's in the center of that opening. So therefore I know exactly where the motor is, I know exactly where the shaft is, and I'll be able to put those back in that spot without any trouble. Now when I mount all this up, I'm going to line up all of these marks so that I wind up getting the fan in the same spot. Because if I need to disassemble it, then I can line everything up and put it back in exactly the same spot, and therefore if it was in balance to start with, it'll be in balance whenever I line it back up for the second time. So now I'm going to go ahead and put together the impeller, and you see I've got the marks here. I'm just lining up my marks. Also, here are the impeller blades, and these are pretty scale. They look much like the what you might find in a large jet engine. So what I'm going to do, this is number 1. I have numbered all of these, by the way. This is number 1, so I'm going to put number 1 on my line, right in the center of my line. And I'm going to go around clockwise, so number 2 would go next to it. And so I'm going to drop it on. And then I'm going to rotate this around so I can always be working from the front. And number 3 would go next to number 2. And number 4 would go, and so on, and we're just going to come right on around, and this would be number 5 and number 6, and I want to keep these down, number 7, so I want to rotate this around a little more, and number 8. Now the main reason for numbering these is because if I spool this up and I find that it's not really balanced very well, then what I can do is leave the unit assembled, loosen the screw on the housing, keep the mandrel or the mount in the same place, but move the fans. So right now I've got number 1 set right here. So what I could do is loosen it and then shift the fans blades around, maybe turn them a quarter of a turn, and then tighten everything back up and spool the fan up again. What you're looking for is a smooth run from the fan. If you have vibration, that'll cause you some noise, and then the noise is what we want to get away from. Now the last part here that I need to do is put on this cap, and I want to make sure that this line here lines up with the line on there already. So I'm going to put it in place and set it down, and you can see here that I have my lines lined up. Now I have a cap that goes over the top of that, and I've put a black line on it, so I'm going to line up the lines with it. And then we have the spinner, which has a line on it, so I'm lining up the line on it. And lastly, we have the screw, which I'm going to drop in and tighten up. I'm just going to run it down to where it's snug, because then I need to check my fan. I want to make sure that everything is seated, and it looks like everything is seated pretty good. So all this is seated very well. So now I'm going to go ahead and snug this down a little bit more. I'm not holding any one blade. I'm actually shifting the weight from securing the fan while I tighten on this to many of the blades, so I don't put any stress on one blade. Alright, and now I've done it, so now you can see that my lines are not lined up here. So I'm going to back this off. I'm going to rotate this back around and give myself a little bit of leeway, and let's see if I get those lines to be lined up. Looks like I went maybe a little bit too far, but I think right there. So now I have those lines pretty well lined up, and those lines correspond with these lines. So if I hold this like this and turn it around, maybe you can see those lines line up pretty good. So now I have the fan back assembled. So now we're ready to mount it, and again I have the flat spot lined up with here, so I'm going to turn this so that it is close to that same location, which would be just like that. So now I can tighten up the 4 set screws and my impeller will be mounted again. And then I'll spool this up and check it for balance. And again, if it's not, it doesn't give me the sound that I'm looking for, it's not in balance, it vibrates, what I can do is loosen it, turn the impellers 90 degrees and tighten it back up. If it gets worse, then I'll loosen it and go the other way from where I started. The idea is take notes, make marks, and then you can work your way to a better balanced fan. I don't like to add epoxy or CA or tape or any of those things, because we know that the fans are made out of composite material. We also know that it'll expand and contract with the heat and with the RPMs of the motor. So the epoxy is not likely to follow the same expansion rate and contraction rate, nor is the CA. So there's a chance that those things might pop off, and if they pop off, then we'll find ourselves rebalancing the fan. So if we can try to balance it by shifting things around, we're much better off, because we don't have anything that can come off or be thrown from the fan again. If it leaves the fan, then the fan's no longer balanced. But at any rate, there's a little insight on the ChangeSun 90mm fan and how it's designed and how it's put together. On the second one, I went ahead and used a permanent marker before I assembled the blades, and the result is shown here. At the end of this clip, I will put up a picture. It's going to show both of these fan units along with a full-size engine, so you can see the effect I was looking for.